Hello and welcome back again. I'm Candace.
And I'm Belle.
And welcome back to our Closing the Early Literacy Gap podcast.
Yes, this podcast is for anyone who has anything to do with small children or even anybody who's in the early stages of learning literacy or learning how to read.
Yep.
So
parents, teachers, administration,
people who train teachers, coaches, anybody.
If you've been with us since the beginning, thank you for following us on this fun journey and bearing with us. We're excited today. Today we're talking about phonics. Our last lesson we talked about phonemic awareness. And today we're diving into phonics, which I think is more well-known than phonemic awareness is.
Well, and as we talked about in our last episode, a lot of people confuse phonemic awareness with phonics.
Yes.
And so just as a recap on that, phonemic awareness is oral only. It's just hearing the different sounds, where phonics is attaching those sounds to symbols.
Yes.
To letters. So we're going to talk about letter, sound, correspondence, and teaching that and how to go about that.
Yes. Let's dive in.
And it's what, episode 8?
Episode 8.
Yes. Okay. And again, I want to say this. We're playing a long game here. And the early literacy ages is sometimes a place where you think you're not making a difference or nothing's happening. Sometimes you see kids make huge difference, but sometimes you're just seeing the very, very beginning laying those foundational blocks, and you can't see the outcome yet.
Yeah.
But remember that it's a long game we're playing. Learning to read and learning things, so many things that go into it, that laying the foundation. And so laying the foundation of phonemic awareness is one thing, and today we're going to talk about laying the foundation of letters and sounds.
Yes.
So, all right. I think the first place we need to go is the controversy around whether to teach the letter names first or the letter sounds first or teach them together. What do you think?
Okay, so like I've mentioned in previous podcasts, I started my teaching journey in a private school. And this private school's literacy program blew me away. I learned so many things that I'd never learned before. And I started teaching, the ages of 2 years, 9 months, all the way up through kindergarten. And at that school, we taught letters and sounds, names and sounds cohesively.
Together,
same time, together. They learned it, and it was great. Where I'm working now, the program that we use just teaches the sounds
at
the very beginning, and doesn't dive into actually giving that letter a name until halfway through the second year, which is crazy to me. I think it needs to be taught at the exact same time, because you use letter names all throughout different subjects and times.
So I would say that the people who are advocates for the type of program where it teaches sounds only first would say that teaching the letter names causes confusion when the kids try to put the letter sounds together. What do you say to that?
I haven't experienced that personally. So with, teaching my particular students and teaching them, because we would do go through the song, right? So I would have the alphabet flashcards, and they had songs where it was like A says ah, B says ba, B says ba, right? And it's like you go through that, and yes, you could have some where it would take a minute for them to
some of the letters match up to the sound. Like B starts with a B sound. But where it gets confusing is when you have W, Y.
Yeah.
Very confusing letters that don't have the sound in them. Or a really big hard one is G.
Yes.
And J.
Yep.
Because G starts with a J sound. It doesn't even have a G sound in it.
Nope.
And so those are the ones that kids tend to get the most confused on. The letter name and the sounds. I think the more learning and study I've come across, I think that you absolutely have to teach the two together.
Yep.
That it can't be letter name first, sound first. It can't be either one of those things. And so
there's this quote. Yeah. There's this quote in this book, Multisensory Teaching of Basic Language Skills by Judith Birsh.
Yeah, I call it the Birch book.
The Birch book.
But each chapter is written by different people.
Okay.
So it's kind of a conglomeration of different research. So
Okay.
this particular chapter is on alphabet knowledge, and it is written by, I was going to look and see who wrote this one so we can give them some credit.
Yeah.
The chapter itself is written by Kay Allen and Graham Niehaus. Okay. So they've written some really great things in here about knowing the letter names and why that's important.
So the first thing that they say right here is research shows and has consistently shown for decades that letter name knowledge is one of the most powerful predictors of learning to read and of later reading achievement. And this is from Caravalis, Holm, and Snowling in 2001.
Well, yeah, I think it actually lists other ones too.
And
so
other
they
sources.
List several different research that goes through that.
Then it says another one. I really like this. It says alphabet later knowledge in preschool and kindergarten strongly predicts later decoding, comprehension, and spelling skills, even when IQ score and socioeconomic status are controlled, as found in the meta-analysis of literacy research done by the National Literacy Panel.
Okay, so I would say that some people would say about that, I'm trying to be devil's advocate here.
No, go ahead.
That's correlation, not causation.
Right, but what we're looking at right now is causation. Okay, let me back up. Let me back up to what I'm saying. It might not be causation for fundamental reading skills necessarily,
right?
But it is causation where it leaks and bleeds into other subjects and later on, because spelling and reading do go hand in hand. You can't spell without knowing the letter names.
Yeah. Well, you can write the word.
You can write the word, but like if you're listening to a teacher dictate, like we do many times in our classroom, and we're saying the letter sounds as we're going. If the kid doesn't know that, then they're just looking to see what formation we wrote on the board, and they're just writing the same formation.
Exactly. So it almost makes it sound like if they know the letter names, then that causes them to learn how to read. But it could just be that the kids who know the letter names are also the kids who are early, are also the kids who pick that kind of thing up early,
right?
Do it early, and that's why. So that's why I say it could be correlation. But what you're saying about it bleeding into lots of other subjects has been my experience as a teacher. I cannot tell you how many times I've taken for granted that the kids know the names of letters.
Yeah,
and I'll say, okay, everybody, touch A, like we're doing a math lesson, and the problems are labeled by letter,
right?
Okay,
touch problem A,
touch the biggest one is B and D. Touch B, and how many kids are touching D?
Yeah,
because they get that mixed up, and that's that's a different issue is learning to distinguish the ones, but just knowing the letter names, that we're actually saying the letter names. I'm not saying touch B,
right? Touch B. Touch
but we don't do that. We take for granted that they know this. And then in our writing program, we start off by teaching alphabetical order. We do a lot of alphabetical order, and they
don't know. What about spelling their name? What about writing their name? Do you go, hey, my name is Candace. Would you go, okay, here we go. We're going to spell your name.
But I think you're actually right there making an argument for learning the sounds, because or how learning the sounds first helps them with phonemic awareness, because we do want them to recognize that there's a correlation. But I think ultimately they need to learn it all.
They do. But when we tell them their names, we're like, hey, how do you spell your name? Kandice.
Right. That's what we take for granted. We take for granted they know the letter names.
Right.
And they have to learn the letter names. And I don't think there's any program out there that doesn't teach that they should learn letter names. It's just a question of when they need to learn it.
Right. And right here, I like this, kind of going off what you're saying. It says, when trying to learn a person's name, many individuals want to see how it's spelled so that the letters help bond it in memory.
Right. So speaking of bonding, that reminds me of what I was telling you earlier. What I first learned when I first started learning how this therapy work for kids with dyslexia is, and this was the big aha for me around this principle, is that and it talks about it right here in this Birsh book on page 172, same chapter.
Yep.
That letter names anchor the varying properties of letters. So what I was told is letters have 4 properties. They have size, they have shape, They have sound and they have name. And the only one that doesn't ever change is the name. And so the reason you need to teach them the name right from the start is to anchor all the other properties to that.
Yeah.
And that was a big aha for me. It was just recognizing that that's the reason.
Especially, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute, when you're teaching that certain letters or combinations of letters make different sounds.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So you have to teach them those letter names.
Right. Just so like I was saying, sound is one of the properties, but it can change.
Yes.
Right? In many, many letters it does. So
Yeah.
that's really important. Okay. So I think we've covered pretty thoroughly that we should be teaching letter names and sounds together.
Yes.
And just as you were saying, A says a, B says b. There's making sure that they're doing it all the time together.
Yes.
Okay. So the next question is, how fast should you teach the letter names? Because there's like preschools and stuff that will do like the letter of the week.
And I mean, great, grand, and wonderful, like you're solidifying. So I can understand where like people are coming in where it's like, hey, we're going to slam this in, right? But unfortunately, those fast kids picked it up on day one and now they're bored, right?
Yes.
The kids who need the extra reps, the faster you go, the more reps they'll get at the end when you're blending with them or when you're pulling them in, as with you.
A principle that I've been taught for many years is that people tend to want to slow down for kids who are slower.
Yes.
But really you should go faster because what they really need is more reps.
They do need more reps.
More faster.
Yes. So yes, teach more faster, I think, is very important. But at the same time, as a teacher, it's also disheartening when you see those kids that are struggling because you do naturally want to slow down for them.
You do.
But what you need to do instead of slowing down for them is individualize with them.
Right. And add in more reps. Go fast and add in more repetitions.
Yep.
I mean, certain things you need to slow down, like when you're doing the sounds, like slow down to say the sounds. They're not, blah, 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 blah. I can't understand what you're saying.
Right.
But ultimately, you want to teach at a faster rate.
Yes.
So I did find in this book I mentioned in our last episode, Reading Above the Fray by Julie Lindsey. I'm just halfway. Yes. I'm just like reading this book and it's so great. But she says this on page 84, teach like a hare, not a tortoise. And she cites a 2020 study by Funday and colleagues that says it found that children who were in classes in which the teacher introduced the entire alphabet within about the first 3 months of the school year performed better on measures of letter sound knowledge, word decoding, and high frequency word reading at the year's end than children who were in classes in which the teacher introduced the alphabet more gradually. And then she goes on to say another study from 2021, Vadasi and Sanders, they attempted to determine how fast is fast enough. And they found that kindergartners and first graders, including multilingual learners, learning 3-letter sound correspondences a week outperformed peers in a slower paced instruction, alphabet knowledge, decoding, and spelling. So faster is better. Yep. Okay. Now let's talk about sounds and connecting the letter names to the sounds. Okay. I came across this program called EBLI. I don't know much about it.
Okay.
But I've heard a couple of podcasts where they've mentioned this. So that stakes into my knowledge. I don't want to pretend like I know a lot about it.
Okay.
But I had heard of it before, and I heard that they'd had some apps or something that I had tried to find. And before I came across this podcast, but it was Melissa and Lori Love Literacy. We've mentioned that podcast before.
Yeah.
Episode 189. They had a teacher named Julie VanLier. She's a kindergarten teacher, and she talked about teaching her kindergartens the 3 EBLI principles, and that from the EBLI program. And I love these. And I think that this is a really great point for teaching kids. My reason here is because so often when we start to think about the fact that different letters, some letters make more than one sound and different sounds can be different letters, and that, spelling in English is crazy. And sometimes we just present it to kids that way.
Yeah.
And we have this attitude ourselves that, well, English is just crazy. So you just have to memorize it.
Which I did. Yeah. I am 100% guilty of that, especially before I learned about certain vowel teams and irregular vowels.
And you start to learn the rules. That
yes, and there's actually a
rules.
reason.
Yeah.
Right. And it's interesting. And English language is by far very complex because we are a melting pot. And when our language, started becoming developed in these words, they come from all over different places.
Yes.
So depending on where they originated will
depend on how it's spelled. For example, if you see PH spelling, it's usually from Greek.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that until recently.
It's just,
you just think, it's just crazy. But there is patterns and there's rules behind them. And so when we tell our students, English is just crazy, we're basically telling, especially the ones who struggle.
You'll figure it out.
Well, I don't know that we're even telling them that. We're telling them that you're going to have to memorize it all.
Yeah.
You're going to have to memorize every single word.
Which is so disheartening.
It's disheartening and it's really hard for them. And so that's what causes them to go into guessing games, where they see the first letter and they guess.
Or panic because they have to read in front of the class and they're not sure.
Yeah. And when we send the message to them that, it's just crazy. English is just crazy. So I really like the idea of teaching kids these 3 principles as principles, as not like, it's just crazy, but as that they're actual principles. Okay. The first principle. And at first glance, I thought they all sounded the same. They're different. So the first principle is that 1, 2, 3, or 4 letters can spell a sound.
Yep.
So like one sound would be F spells, right? 1 letter, 1 sound.
Yep.
Okay. Or 2 letters could be like sh or ch, right? 3 letters, IGH.
Yeah.
That's I. 4 letters, EIGH, right? It says only 1 sound. And in the last episode, we talked about phonemic awareness. Have you had any students who are really advanced and you ask them to break apart the sounds in a word like soap?
Yes.
And they say S-O-A-P.
Yes.
Because they already know how to spell it.
Yep.
And they're not recognizing that there's a difference between the sounds and the letters. And so when you have E-I-G-H, that's 4 letters, but it's only making 1 sound. And helping them to make that connection and knowing that that's normal. That it's normal for more than 1 letter. Trigraphs, digraphs, and quadrigraphs is the official word for it. But they don't have to know that to know that 1, 2, 3, or 4 letters can spell sound. Okay, that's the first principle. Second principle, a sound can be spelled in many ways.
Yeah.
So
we just, right?
It's a perfect example.
C that says K that says C and K say one time, right? Not right? And then you have CH that can also say
right, as in school.
Yeah.
Or Christmas.
Yeah.
Right? So that can be very confusing. But if they know already from the outset that a sound can be spelled in many ways, then that helps. And then the last principle is that the same spelling can represent different sounds. So CH, for example, can say
3 different sounds.
Or sh. And the really big one is OUGH. That says ow.
Yep.
Those 6 sounds. Look at that.
Yes.
I just
I'm proud of you.
It's been a while since I've done that.
I'm proud of you. And if you haven't, there's an I Love Lucy episode where she is working with Ricky on reading in English.
They're preparing for their baby to be born.
Yes. And he's trying to read this story and she keeps correcting him because all of these words have OUGH, but it's all pronounced differently. And it's hilarious.
It's really funny.
We'll see if we can get that clip on here
or link it in
or link it somewhere. So you guys can see it if you haven't. But it's hilarious. It's just, it's a classic.
And he just throws up his hands and says, that's it. Our child's going to speak Spanish.
Yeah. We're just done.
It's one of those examples of English being crazy. But if you already know ahead of time that the same spelling can represent different sounds, then these things can be taught.
Yes.
And then it doesn't overwhelm the kids to think, it's crazy. I just never know. Okay. So it keeps them from thinking that phonics rules are random.
Yep.
Right. And that they can't be learned.
Yeah.
It keeps them from, it prepares them to learn more than one way on each sound and not just what? I thought we already learned that letter. But it prepares them ahead of time. And I think it makes it
yes. And it also teaches them to start decoding and looking for those patterns, you know, and using that orthographic part of their brain to be able
to find those patterns.
Yep.
And on that note, This is one of the biggest things I think kids with dyslexia or reading disabilities oftentimes struggle with, is that their brain just doesn't pick up on those patterns as quickly and as easily.
Yes.
But they can be taught those patterns.
They can.
And when they're taught those patterns, they start to map them in their brain, and we can change their brains.
Yep.
So we will have an episode later more about reading disabilities, but I wanted to mention that here too, because I'm sure some of you are listening who have kids who are struggling, and maybe you're like, I've taught them, they need more reps, but they can be taught those specific patterns and rules. So that's it, I think, for letters and sounds.
It is.
And we're so glad you joined us today. And join us next time. We're going to be talking about vowels.
Yes.
Vowels specifically. It's going to be all about vowels. It's going to be awesome.
And we're excited. So thanks for sticking with us. Any comments or questions, please let us know. If you have additional information, that you think we'd love to hear, please share it.
Yeah, we definitely don't have the monopoly on all the information.
Yes, there's so much out there.
Right. We have a lot more to learn too.